Come closer. The shadows have missed you, and tonight they have a new story to tell. Welcome to Scary Stories After Dark. Velma Hayes hated dusk. It was the hour when the world stopped pretending to be busy. Morning had noise. Cars starting, coffee brewing, radios murmuring through diner kitchens. Even the late afternoon carried the rhythm of people moving from one place to another. But dusk. Dusk lingered. It stretched shadows across the walls and filled quiet rooms with the soft, creeping feeling that something unseen had slipped closer while no one was looking. Velma had learned a long time ago that dusk was when the dreams liked to return. Her bedroom was dim except for the pale yellow glow of the lamp on the nightstand. The bulb had always been too weak to properly light the room, leaving the corners soaked in soft gray darkness. The blinds were half closed, letting narrow bars of fading evening light spill across the floorboards. 6 o'clock. Velma sat on the edge of the bed in her robe, one slipper hanging halfway off her foot. A cigarette trembled between her fingers. Ash had already grown long and fragile at the tip. She hadn't noticed. The phone was pressed to her ear. "Yes," she whispered. Her voice sounded thinner than she remembered. A quiet pause followed. Velma listened, nodding slowly as the voice on the other end spoke in calm, practiced tones. Her therapist. Velma took a shaky breath and rubbed the heel of her hand against her temple. They started again last night. She stared toward the window without really seeing it. The cigarette burned lower. It's always the same place. Another pause. Velma swallowed. The mall. Her voice faltered on the word. The lamp beside her illuminated the cluttered battlefield of the nightstand. Prescription bottles, scattered pill caps, an overfilled ashtray buried beneath cigarette stubs. The smell of smoke hung thick in the air. "I'm walking through the food court," she continued quietly. "Except everything is wrong." Her fingers tightened around the cigarette. "The lights are flickering. The escalators keep running, but nobody's there. I hear people talking." Velma closed her eyes. "But I can't see them." Silence filled the room for several seconds. Then the therapist asked something softly. Velma exhaled a fragile laugh that carried no humor. "Yes." Her eyes opened again. "That part is always the same too." Her gaze drifted toward the bedroom door, toward the hallway, toward the quiet house. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Audrey is with me." The cigarette ash finally collapsed, scattering gray dust across the floor. Velma didn't notice. "She tells me not to turn around." Velma's breathing grew shallow. And then her voice stopped. On the other end of the line, the therapist waited. Velma swallowed hard. And then something behind us starts walking. The room fell silent again. Outside, a car door slammed somewhere down the street. Velma flinched. The sound jolted her back into the present. She glanced toward the clock. Andrew would be leaving soon. Velma inhaled deeply and forced a thin smile that no one could see. "I'm sorry," she said quietly into the phone. "I didn't mean to ramble." Her hand trembled slightly as she lifted the cigarette again. "It's just been worse lately." The therapist spoke again. Velma nodded slowly. "Yes," she murmured. "I know why." Her voice lowered. "Because tonight," her eyes drifted toward the darkening window. "He's starting that new job." A long pause. Velma's fingers tightened around the phone. "At the warehouse." She hesitated, then whispered something she hadn't admitted out loud in years. "I just hope." Her gaze drifted toward the horizon beyond the houses, toward the direction of the old mall. "He never goes near that place." Andrew Hayes had always liked quiet places. Not because they were peaceful, because quiet made it easier to notice things other people missed. Small sounds, movement in the corner of a room, the subtle shift of someone's posture before they decided to lie. Andrew believed observation was a skill you could train like a muscle, and if he wanted to make it into the police academy one day, he intended to sharpen it every chance he got, which was exactly why the security job appealed to him. The ad had been simple. Night security needed, VesperGate Mall renovation project, part-time, flexible hours, immediate hire. Andrew had stared at the listing longer than he wanted to admit. Most people in Enmity End avoided the old mall entirely. Even decades after it closed, the building carried a reputation that locals preferred not to talk about. Too many disappearances. Too many unanswered questions. Andrew, however, had never believed in rumors, only facts. And the fact was, the mall was reopening soon. Contractors were already inside restoring storefronts to their original 1980s layout. Neon signs were being rewired, escalators repaired, marble floors polished. Someone needed to guard the place overnight, and Andrew needed the money. The phone interview had lasted less than 5 minutes. The voice on the other end had been calm. Male, unusually flat, no small talk, no questions about experience. Just confirmation of his name, his availability, and whether he understood the rules. Do not leave the building during your shift. Do not allow unauthorized visitors inside. And do not enter construction zones marked as restricted. Andrew had agreed without hesitation. A job was a job. Still, the man on the phone had paused before ending the call as if he wanted to say something else. Something important. But the moment passed. Andrew glanced down at the dashboard clock as his truck rolled through the quiet outskirts of town. 6:42 p.m. The sky had begun shifting into deep purple twilight, the last traces of sunlight bleeding slowly behind the tree line. Ahead of him, the silhouette of VesperGate Mall emerged from the horizon. Even from the road, the building looked enormous. The structure sat like a dark, sleeping animal against the fading sky. Rows of empty parking spaces stretched in every direction, cracked asphalt lined with faded white paint that had once guided thousands of cars. Andrew slowed the truck as he approached the entrance road. Several construction floodlights had been set up around the building's exterior, but most of them were still off. The mall itself remained dark, silent, watching. Andrew parked near the employee entrance and shut off the engine. For a moment, he simply sat there, listening. Wind moved softly across the empty parking lot. Somewhere nearby, a loose metal sign creaked against its chain. Andrew grabbed his flashlight from the passenger seat and stepped out of the truck. The night air carried the faint smell of dust and old concrete. Above him, the massive letters on the building still read, VesperGate Mall. Most of the bulbs had burned out years ago. Only 3 letters still flickered faintly. Andrew adjusted the strap of his radio and walked toward the side entrance. The metal door stood slightly ajar, waiting. Andrew pushed it open and stepped inside. The darkness swallowed him whole. The VesperGate Mall parking lot had always looked bigger at night. Kieran noticed it the moment their van rolled to a stop near the far edge of the cracked asphalt. The headlights washed over long rows of empty spaces before he killed the engine and the darkness closed back in around them. For a few seconds, no one spoke. The building sat across the lot like a silent monument to a time no one quite remembered clearly anymore. Juniper leaned forward between the seats, peering through the windshield. "Okay," she said quietly. "That's way bigger than I expected." 83,000 square feet, Ludwig replied from the back without looking up from his equipment bag. 3 main floors originally. Renovation permits say they're restoring the original food court layout too. Juniper turned slightly. "You memorized the renovation permits?" Ludwig shrugged. "That's what research looks like." Zane snorted. The brim of his backward baseball cap cast a shadow across his eyes as he shoved open the van door. "Or," he said, hopping down onto the asphalt, "we could just go inside and see it." Cool night air swept into the vehicle. Sloane grabbed her camera and followed him out, adjusting the strap around her shoulder as she looked up at the mall's dark outline. Even with the construction lights set up around the perimeter, the building still felt wrong. Like it had been sleeping too long. Kieran stepped out last, closing the van door softly behind him. Across the parking lot, the massive letters above the mall entrance were barely visible in the fading light. VesperGate Mall. Only a few bulbs flickered weakly. Sloane raised the camera and slowly panned across the building. "Rolling," she murmured. The red recording light blinked on. "Urban Depths Exploration Log," she said quietly into the lens. "Tonight we're in Enmity End investigating the abandoned VesperGate Mall. closed in 1987 after a series of disappearances that were never officially solved. The wind shifted across the parking lot. Somewhere along the building's exterior, a loose metal sign creaked softly. Juniper folded her arms. "Remind me again why we do these at night?" "Because," Zane said, already walking toward the mall, "it's way cooler." Kieran exchanged a quick glance with Sloane before following. The closer they got to the building, the larger it seemed. The entrance doors had been boarded shut, but along the side of the structure, a temporary construction door stood partially open. Ludwig tapped one of the walkie-talkies clipped to his vest. "Comms check before we go in." Juniper lifted hers. "Loud and clear." Sloane nodded. Zane gave his a casual click. "Yep." Kieran tested his last. Static crackled briefly through the speakers before clearing. "Good enough," Ludwig said. Zane grinned and pulled the construction door open wider. Beyond it stretched a long, dark service hallway. The smell of dust and old tile drifted outward. "Ladies and gentlemen," Zane said with a theatrical bow, "welcome to Vesper Gate." One by one, they stepped inside. The door closed behind them with a hollow metallic thud. None of them noticed the security floodlight outside flicker, then go dark. The beam of Andrew's flashlight carved a narrow tunnel through the darkness. Dust drifted lazily through the light like slow-moving snow. The mall smelled older than Andrew expected. Not rotten exactly, just forgotten. A mixture of stale air, dried cleaning chemicals, and something faintly metallic that lingered deep in the walls. Andrew stepped slowly across the tiled floor of the main corridor, his boots echoing softly through the empty space. Each sound traveled farther than it should have. The mall's interior was enormous. Escalators rose silently toward the upper levels, their metal steps frozen in place like the teeth of some giant machine. Storefront gates were pulled shut along both sides of the corridor, their glass displays covered with protective paper and renovation tape. A faded directory sign still stood near the center of the hallway. Andrew paused beside it, brushing dust away with his sleeve. "You are here." The red arrow pointed toward the main atrium. Below it, several store names remained barely visible beneath the grime: Radio Shack, Chess King, Orange Julius. Andrew felt a small, unexpected smile tug at the corner of his mouth. His mother used to talk about this place sometimes when he was a kid, how crowded it had been, how the music echoed through the food court, how people used to line up outside the movie theater on Friday nights. He lifted his radio. "Security patrol beginning interior sweep," he said quietly. Static answered him. Andrew frowned slightly. He tapped the side of the radio. Nothing. Probably interference from the construction equipment. He lowered the device and continued down the corridor. The darkness ahead felt thicker somehow, swallowing the edges of his flashlight beam. Andrew passed a row of closed clothing stores before stopping near the food court entrance. The metal security gates had been rolled up here for renovation. Beyond them, the enormous open space stretched into shadow. Rows of plastic tables sat scattered across the floor like abandoned board game pieces. Old soda fountains stood behind the counters of several fast food stalls, their metal dispensers dull with age. Andrew stepped forward slowly. The beam of his flashlight swept across the empty room. Nothing moved, nothing breathed. Nothing existed except the faint hum of distant electrical wiring somewhere deep in the walls. Andrew exhaled quietly. Maybe this job wouldn't be so bad after. A sound echoed through the mall. Andrew froze. It was faint. So faint he almost convinced himself he imagined it. A metallic clatter, somewhere far down the corridor behind him. Andrew turned slowly, raising the flashlight toward the dark hallway he had just walked through. The beam revealed nothing, only empty tile and rows of silent storefronts. He stood there for several seconds, listening. Waiting. The mall remained still. Andrew lowered the flashlight again. Probably contractors leaving equipment around, he muttered. But the quiet had changed. The air felt different now, heavier, as if the building itself had taken a slow breath. Andrew turned back toward the food court and stopped. For just a moment, he could have sworn one of the plastic chairs had moved. Only a few inches. But when he aimed the flashlight at it again, the chair sat perfectly still. Andrew rubbed the back of his neck. "Great," he murmured. "First night and I'm already jumping at shadows." He turned and continued his patrol. Behind him, in the darkness of the food court, one of the soda fountains hissed softly. And somewhere deep inside the mall, something shifted. The mall sounded different once the door closed behind them. Outside, the wind had moved through the empty parking lot like a living thing. Inside, the air barely moved at all. Their footsteps echoed strangely across the tile as the group moved slowly down the main corridor. Flashlight beams swept across shuttered storefronts and faded posters that had been taped to the glass decades earlier. Juniper's light passed over a peeling advertisement for a grand opening sale. The smiling models in the picture wore oversized denim jackets and neon headbands. "Okay," she murmured. "This place is officially creepy." "It's just old," Ludwig said, though his voice was quieter than usual. He lifted a handheld EMF reader from his pack and flicked it on. The small device chirped softly as its screen lit up. Zane leaned over his shoulder. "Let me guess," he said with a smirk. "Ghosts." "It measures electrical fluctuations," Ludwig replied flatly. "So, ghosts." Sloane walked a few steps ahead, camera steady against her shoulder. The red recording light reflected faintly in the glass storefronts as she panned slowly down the hallway. Everywhere she pointed the lens, the mall seemed to stretch farther than it should have, Rows of stores, dark escalators, long corridors disappearing into shadow. "You feel that?" she said quietly. Kieran glanced at her. "Feel what?" Sloane lowered the camera slightly. "Like we're not supposed to be here." Juniper gave a short laugh. "Breaking into abandoned places usually comes with that feeling." "Not like this," Sloane said. She couldn't explain it. The mall didn't feel empty. It felt occupied. Zane rolled his eyes and stepped ahead of the group. "You guys watch too many horror movies." He turned his flashlight toward a side hallway branching away from the main corridor. A narrow service passage. Dark, quiet, interesting. "I'm gonna check this out," he said casually. Kieran immediately shook his head. "No splitting up." Zane waved dismissively. "I'm literally going 10 feet. Ludwig clipped a walkie-talkie to his vest and tossed another toward Zane. "Take it." Zane caught it with one hand. "Relax," he said with a grin. "I'll be right back." He turned and walked down the side corridor. His flashlight beam bounced off the walls as he disappeared deeper into the passage. For a few seconds, the rest of the group stood quietly in the main hallway. Then Juniper lifted her radio. "Zane, you copy?" Static answered her. A soft crackle. Then, Yeah, Zane's voice said through the speaker. But it sounded strange, thinner, like the signal had traveled much farther than it should have. "I found something," Zane continued. His voice echoed faintly through the walkie. "You guys might want to see this." Kieran frowned. "What is it?" There was a pause, long enough that Juniper lowered the radio slightly. Then Zane's voice returned, quieter now. "That's weird." "What?" Sloane asked. Another pause. Then, "Guys." The static grew louder. "Why is there another?" The radio erupted in sharp interference. Juniper jerked the device away from her ear. "Zane?" Only static answered. The hallway around them had grown very quiet, too quiet. Kieran lifted his flashlight toward the corridor where Zane had gone. The beam revealed nothing but darkness. He grabbed his radio. "Zane," he said firmly, "answer me." The speaker crackled. Then, a faint sound slipped through the static. Not Zane's voice. Breathing. Andrew had just finished checking the west corridor when he heard it. A voice, faint, echoing somewhere deeper in the building. He stopped mid-step, flashlight lifting instinctively as he listened. At first he thought it was the building again. Old pipes shifting, metal settling inside the walls. But then it came again. A shout. distant, panicked. Andrew's posture stiffened immediately. That wasn't construction noise. That was a person. He grabbed the radio clipped to his shoulder. "Hello?" he called out into the darkness of the mall. His voice carried farther than he expected, bouncing off the empty storefronts. No answer came back. Then, another voice, closer this time. "Zane?" Andrew turned sharply toward the sound, flashlight beam slicing across the corridor. "Trespassers." The thought landed instantly. His jaw tightened. Great. First night on the job, and someone had already broken in. Andrew started down the corridor at a quick pace. "Hello?" he called again. "Security." The word echoed through the mall. Ahead of him, a cluster of moving lights suddenly appeared around the corner. Flashlights. 5 of them. Andrew slowed just as the group rounded the corner and nearly collided with them. Everyone froze. For a split second, the hallway filled with overlapping beams of light and stunned silence. Juniper blinked first. Holy... Andrew lifted a hand immediately. "Security," he said firmly. "You're not supposed to be in here." Kieran stared at him. "Your security?" Andrew frowned. "Yes." Sloane stepped forward, breathless. "Did you see someone run through here?" Andrew shook his head. "No." "What?" A scream tore through the mall. The sound echoed violently through the corridors. High, desperate, unmistakable. "Zane." Everyone turned toward the noise at the same time. "Zane!" Juniper shouted. The scream came again, somewhere down the next hallway. Andrew didn't hesitate. "Move," he said. They ran. Flashlight beams bounced wildly across the walls as the group sprinted through the corridor. Their footsteps thundered through the empty mall as the scream grew louder. Then they reached the corner and stopped. Zane was there, at the far end of the hallway. His body was halfway through a narrow metal service door. His fingers clawed desperately at the tile floor. "Help me!" Something inside the doorway pulled him backward, hard. Zane's body jerked violently as he fought against it. "Don't let it!" His words cut off as he slid another foot toward the door. Juniper lunged forward. "Zane!" Andrew grabbed her arm. "Wait!" Too late. The door slammed shut. The sound echoed like a gunshot through the corridor. Silence followed. Everyone stood frozen, breathing hard. The hallway stretched empty before them. The metal door sat perfectly still, as if nothing had happened. Juniper's voice shook. What the hell was that?" Andrew stared at the door. His heart was pounding harder than he wanted to admit. Behind him, Ludwig slowly lowered his walkie-talkie. The speaker crackled softly. Then, static. And through the static, Zane's voice whispered faintly, "Guys?" For several seconds, no one moved. The metal service door sat quietly at the end of the hallway, its dull surface reflecting the trembling beams of their flashlights. Andrew stepped forward first. His training, what little he had, pushed through the shock that still hummed in his chest. Someone had taken Zane. That meant someone was still on the other side of that door. He reached for the handle. Kieran grabbed his arm. "Wait." Andrew looked back. "What?" Kieran nodded toward the door. "You saw that too, right?" Andrew frowned. "Yeah, someone pulled him in." "No," Kieran said quietly. His voice had the strange tone people use when they're trying not to sound afraid. "I mean the door." Juniper swallowed. "It wasn't there before." Silence settled across the hallway. Andrew turned slowly. His flashlight swept across the corridor behind them. The long hallway stretched back exactly as it had before. Rows of dark storefronts, dusty tile, silent escalators. Nothing out of place. Except he looked back at the door. The frame had been welded directly into the concrete wall. Old bolts, faded paint, as if it had always been there. Andrew shook his head. "Look, someone's hurt. We don't have time to debate architecture." He grabbed the handle, cold metal pressed against his palm. For a moment he hesitated. Something about the air near the door felt wrong. Cooler, damp, like standing near the entrance of a cave. Andrew pulled. The hinges groaned softly as the door opened. Flashlight beams spilled through the doorway and stopped. The room beyond the door was enormous. Andrew blinked, because it should not have been possible. The hallway they had just come from sat in the center of the mall. There wasn't enough space in the building for a room like this. But the space beyond the door stretched endlessly into darkness. Rows of plastic food court tables filled the vast chamber, hundreds of them, maybe thousands. Fluorescent lights buzzed weakly overhead, flickering in uneven rows that disappeared far into the distance. Juniper stepped closer. Is this the food court?" Ludwig shook his head slowly. "It can't be." The smell hit them next. Old grease, syrup, burnt sugar, the scent of fast food that had been left to rot for decades. Sloane lifted her camera instinctively. The lens panned slowly across the impossible room. The food stalls lining the edges of the court looked strangely familiar. Orange Julius, hot dog on a stick, Sparrow. But the signs repeated, again and again and again. The same stores stretching endlessly in both directions. Andrew stepped across the threshold. His boots touched the linoleum floor with a soft echo. Behind him, the others followed. The door closed quietly. The sound seemed to vanish in the vastness of the room. Kieran turned slowly in a circle. This isn't the same mall. No one argued. Somewhere deep within the endless rows of tables, something moved. A wet, dragging sound slid across the floor. Juniper froze. "Did you hear that?" Another sound followed. Soft, rhythmic, like hundreds of mouths opening and closing. Andrew raised his flashlight toward the darkness. The beam traveled across rows of empty tables, across sticky linoleum, across a pile of old food trays. Then stopped. Something enormous shifted just beyond the edge of the light. A mound of pale, glistening flesh slowly pulled itself forward across the floor. The thing made a wet, slurping noise as it moved. And as Andrew's flashlight climbed higher, the mound opened. Dozens of human-like mouths stretched across its surface, all of them whispering, "Hungry." For a moment, none of them breathed. Andrew's flashlight trembled slightly in his hand as the beam rested on the thing in the darkness. It was enormous, a slow-moving hill of pale, translucent flesh sliding across the linoleum floor like melting wax. Layers of half-dissolved food wrappers, plastic forks, and paper trays clung to its surface as it moved. And the mouths. God, the mouths. Hundreds of them opened and closed across the creature's body in slow, hungry rhythms. Some whispered, some chewed, some simply hung open, drooling thick strings of saliva that splattered against the tile. Juniper made a soft, choking sound. "Andrew." Andrew didn't answer. He couldn't, because the creature had stopped moving. Its countless mouths suddenly went still, as if listening. Then the thing shifted. A ripple traveled through its gelatinous mass as it slowly turned toward the group. One of the mouths near the top of the mound stretched wider than the others, and from it came a wet, echoing inhale. The creature had smelled them. "Don't move," Andrew whispered, his voice barely carried beyond his own lips. Behind him, someone's shoe squeaked against the floor. The sound was tiny, barely a sound at all. But in the vast silence of the endless food court, it might as well have been a gunshot. The creature shuddered, then it surged forward. The sound it made was horrifying, a massive slurp as its entire body collapsed inward and launched itself across the floor in a sudden burst of speed. "Run!" Andrew shouted. Flashlights swung wildly as the group scattered between rows of plastic tables. The creature slammed into the nearest row of chairs, absorbing them instantly into its mass with a crunch of bending metal and plastic. Juniper vaulted over a table, slipping slightly on the sticky floor as she landed. Behind her, the thing slid forward with terrifying speed, its mouths opening and snapping as it swallowed everything in its path. "This way!" Kieran yelled. He pointed toward a corridor branching away from the food court. The group sprinted toward it. Andrew risked a glance back. The creature had already devoured 3 full rows of tables. Its massive body pulsed hungrily as it dragged itself closer. One of the mouths spoke. Not words, just sound. A wet whisper that carried through the food court like wind through broken pipes. Sloane nearly dropped her camera as she ran. "Don't stop!" Andrew shouted. The corridor loomed ahead. Narrow, dark, exactly what they needed. Juniper reached it first, darting inside as the others followed. Andrew dove through the entrance last. Behind him, the creature slammed against the corridor walls. Its massive bulk struggled to squeeze through the narrow opening. The mouths shrieked in hungry frustration. Andrew slammed the service gate beside the corridor shut. Metal rattled violently as the creature pressed against it. For several seconds, the gate bent inward under the pressure. Then, the creature slowly pulled back. The hallway fell silent. The group stood there, gasping for breath. Juniper leaned against the wall. What the hell is this place? No one answered. Because behind them, the corridor stretched far longer than it should have. The fluorescent lights flickered weakly overhead. And lining both sides of the hallway, behind glass storefronts, hundreds of mannequins stared back at them. No one spoke for several seconds. Their breathing slowly steadied in the quiet hallway, but the silence that followed felt heavier than the chase they had just escaped. Andrew turned first. His flashlight beam swept slowly down the corridor. Glass storefronts lined both sides of the passage, their windows spotless despite the dust that covered everything else in the mall. Inside each store stood mannequins. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds. They wore elegant clothing from another era. Velvet dresses, tailored suits, glittering evening gowns stitched with silver thread. But none of them had faces. Just smooth, pale heads that reflected the weak fluorescent light. Juniper wrapped her arms around herself. "Okay," she whispered. "This is officially worse." Ludwig stepped closer to one of the windows. His flashlight passed across a row of mannequins posed around a mirrored display platform. "They're detailed," he said quietly. And they were. The mannequins looked almost real. Their fingers were sculpted with delicate knuckles and faint creases at the joints. Their clothing hung naturally against their bodies as if the fabric had been tailored for someone who had once been alive. Sloane slowly raised her camera again. The red recording light flickered faintly in the glass. "Why would this part of the mall still be intact?" she murmured. Andrew didn't answer, because something else had caught his attention. He stepped closer to one of the displays. A mannequin stood near the front of the window wearing a deep blue evening coat stitched with gold embroidery. Andrew's eyes moved slowly over it. The coat looked wrong somehow. Not the fabric, the stitching. The seams along the sleeves were uneven, thicker in some places, almost hand-sewn. Andrew leaned slightly closer. Something dark stained the inside of the coat collar. Not dirt, not grease. Juniper's voice broke the silence behind him. "Andrew?" He turned slightly. "Yeah?" Juniper pointed down the corridor. "Did those move?" Everyone turned. At the far end of the hallway, another store window displayed a row of mannequins arranged in a perfect semicircle. Except now they were facing the corridor. They hadn't been before. Kieran frowned. Did anyone? A soft sound interrupted him. Thread sliding through fabric. Slow, careful, somewhere inside one of the stores. the sound came again. A gentle pull, followed by the faint snip of scissors. Andrew raised his flashlight toward the nearest display window. The mannequins inside stood perfectly still, silent, watching. Then something moved behind them. A tall shape passed slowly between the mannequins in the back of the store. It unfolded itself upward, higher, higher still, until its head brushed the ceiling. The figure stepped forward into the weak fluorescent light, 15 feet tall. Its body was stitched together from layers of pale skin and strips of designer fabric. Threads dangled from its limbs like loose veins. Its long arms ended in fingers made entirely of sewing needles, and where its face should have been, a smooth porcelain mannequin mask stared back at them. The figure tilted its head, studying them. Then one long needle finger lifted slowly toward the glass and tapped once. The sound echoed down the corridor. The mannequins in the other stores turned all at once, facing the group. Andrew's voice dropped to a whisper. "Run." They ran until the mannequins disappeared behind them. The corridor twisted through several narrow hallways before finally opening into a wide doorway framed with cracked marble pillars. Andrew slowed first. His flashlight beam slid across the threshold and stopped. Beyond the doorway stretched a massive atrium. The ceiling soared several stories high, ending in a shattered glass dome that filtered the outside world into a strange, dim twilight. Pale violet light spilled through the broken panes, casting long fractured shadows across the floor. For a moment, no one moved. Because what filled the atrium wasn't normal vegetation, rows of planter beds spread across the space like a garden. But instead of plants, jagged crystalline structures grew from the soil. They rose in delicate branching shapes that mimicked leaves and vines. Every surface glittered like glass. Juniper exhaled slowly. "Okay, this place is beautiful." Ludwig shook his head. "No," he whispered. His flashlight beam passed across the nearest crystal cluster. Each surface reflected their lights back in sharp fragments, scattering dozens of distorted reflections across the room. "It's a mirror maze." Sloane lifted her camera carefully. Everywhere she pointed the lens, reflections stared back. Hundreds of tiny versions of themselves flickered across the crystalline garden. Andrew stepped cautiously onto the stone path leading into the atrium. The crystals chimed softly as the air shifted. A faint sound echoed somewhere high above them, like glass brushing against glass. Kieran looked up. The broken dome stretched into darkness. "I don't like this," he said quietly. Juniper nodded. "Same." Andrew's light moved slowly across the towering crystal structures. Then something caught his attention. Near the base of one of the planters sat a small object resting in the dirt. He approached carefully. The others followed. Andrew crouched and picked it up. A hat, old. The fabric had faded with time, but the embroidered gemstones along the brim still glimmered faintly in the twilight. Andrew's breath caught in his throat. He knew this hat. His mother had shown it to him once when he was a kid. It had belonged to her best friend, Audrey, the woman who had vanished inside this mall nearly 40 years ago. Andrew turned the hat slowly in his hands. Dark stains marked the inside lining. Blood. Juniper noticed the expression on his face. Andrew didn't answer, because something else lay half buried beside the hat. A necklace. He brushed the dirt away. 2 small metal heart halves, one piece engraved with a single name, Velma. The other half, missing. Andrew stared at it, his mind racing. His mother had been here. She hadn't just heard the stories. She had survived this place. A sudden sound echoed through the atrium. The crystals around them chimed sharply. Sloane slowly tilted her camera upward. Something enormous unfolded across the shattered glass dome above them. A massive pair of wings spread open, 30 feet wide, each feather made entirely of jagged mirror shards. The creature clung to the ceiling like a giant moth, its body thin and skeletal against the twilight sky. The wings shifted. Thousands of reflections exploded across the garden. Juniper gasped. "Don't..." Too late. Andrew caught a glimpse of his own reflection in one of the mirrored shards, and the creature's head snapped toward him instantly. Its wings shattered the silence as they opened fully. Kieran whispered the only thing anyone was thinking. "Run." The creature dropped from the dome. Glass wings slammed downward with a thunderous crash as shard wing plunged through the air. Thousands of reflected lights scattered across the atrium like exploding stars. "Move!" Andrew shouted. They ran. The stone pathway cut through the crystalline garden in twisting lines, forcing them to dodge between razor-sharp glass plants that chimed violently as they brushed past. Behind them, the creature struck the ground. The impact sent a shockwave through the atrium floor. Crystal branches shattered. Mirror shards rained across the stone like falling knives. Andrew sprinted ahead, Audrey's hat and the broken necklace clenched tightly in his fist. The others followed close behind as Shard Wing launched itself forward again. Its wings beat once, twice. Each movement sent blinding flashes of reflection across the garden. "Don't look at it," Kieran yelled. Juniper kept her eyes on the ground as they ran. "Little late for that." Shardwing shrieked. The sound was high and metallic, like glass screaming against steel. A massive wing swept past them, smashing several crystal trees apart as the creature lunged. Andrew spotted an opening ahead, a staircase spiraling upward along the far wall of the atrium. "Stairs!" he shouted. They bolted toward it. Shard wings slammed into the base of the structure seconds later, mirror wings scraping violently against the stone as it tried to follow. But the staircase was narrow, too narrow for its enormous wingspan. The creature shrieked again in frustration as the group climbed. Andrew didn't slow until they burst through the doorway at the top. Then he slammed the door behind them. Silence fell instantly. Everyone stood there, breathing hard. Juniper leaned against the wall. "Okay, I vote we never go back down there." No one disagreed. Andrew finally opened his hand. The hat and necklace rested in his palm. He stared at them. "My mom was here," he said quietly. Sloane looked at him. "What?" Andrew held up the necklace. "Velma is my mother." The group exchanged stunned looks. Ludwig spoke first. "So she survived this place?" Andrew nodded slowly, but Audrey didn't. A deep sound rolled through the hallway, not from below, from ahead. They turned. The corridor before them looked nothing like the mall. Thick red carpet covered the floor. Dark mahogany paneling lined the walls. Heavy wooden doors stretched endlessly in both directions like the hallway of an old mansion. Kieran frowned. "This doesn't make any sense." Andrew stepped forward cautiously. "It's the top floor." Juniper glanced behind them. "So, where's Zane?" As if answering her question, a voice echoed down the hallway, faint, weak. "Guys?" Everyone froze. Juniper's eyes widened. "That's him." Zane's voice came again, from somewhere deeper in the executive wing. "Guys, I'm in here." Andrew's grip tightened on the flashlight. "Stay close," he said. They moved down the red carpet together. The hallway stretched longer than it should have. Door after door passed in silence. Then something moved across the ceiling above them. Slow, spider-like, watching. A long, pale hand reached over the edge of the ceiling beam, then another and another. The creature unfolded downward. A towering humanoid figure dressed in a tattered tuxedo crawled silently along the ceiling, its limbs stretched impossibly long, gripping the wood panels like a spider clinging to a wall. Its pale face turned slowly toward the group. And when it spoke, it used Zane's voice. "Help me." Andrew whispered the truth before anyone else could. "That's not him." The creature smiled and dropped from the ceiling. The creature hit the carpet with a heavy, graceful thud. For something so large, it moved with unsettling quiet. The landlord straightened slowly, its impossibly long limbs unfolding until it stood nearly 9 feet tall. The ruined tuxedo hanging from its body looked decades out of date. Thin lapels, yellowed shirt front, a black bow tie stained with something dark. Its pale face twitched as if trying to remember how to smile. Then it spoke again in Zane's voice. "Guys, I'm scared." Juniper's eyes flicked toward Andrew. "That's messed up." Andrew didn't look away from the creature. "Stay behind me." The landlord tilted its head, studying them with slow curiosity. When it moved, it didn't walk. It skittered. Its long arms slapped against the carpet as it darted forward with horrifying speed. "Run!" Andrew shouted. They scattered down the hallway as the creature lunged behind them. Doors flew past on either side, each identical. Heavy wood, brass handles, small nameplates worn smooth with time. "Which one?" Ludwig called. "Anyone," Kieran answered. Andrew grabbed the nearest handle and shoved the door open. Inside was a large office, mahogany desk, tall bookshelves, and a single flickering desk lamp casting a dim yellow glow. And tied to a chair in the center of the room, Zane. His head snapped up when they burst in. Oh, thank God. Juniper rushed forward. Zane! Andrew slammed the door behind them. The landlord hit it seconds later. The wood bowed inward with a violent crack. Andrew scanned the room quickly. There, at the far wall, another door, old, metal, rust creeping along its edges. Zane struggled as Ludwig cut the rope binding his wrists. Hurry up, Andrew said. The door behind them shuddered again. A long, pale hand punched through the wood. Fingers clawed wildly through the splintering hole. Juniper helped Zane to his feet. You good? Define good. Andrew shoved the metal door open. Cold air rushed into the room. Beyond the threshold stretched an open field. Corn. Endless rows of it swaying under a pale moonlit sky. Everyone stared. Is that outside? Ludwig said. Andrew didn't wait to debate it. Go. They sprinted through the doorway just as the office door exploded inward behind them. The landlord shrieked, a sound like dozens of voices screaming together. Its long limbs burst through the broken doorway as it chased them across the dirt. Corn stalks whipped around them as the group ran blindly through the rows. Andrew didn't stop until the ground beneath his boots changed. Gravel, real gravel. A narrow country road stretched ahead. Behind them, the cornfield stood perfectly still. The metal door was gone. The mall was gone. Only the wind moved through the quiet night. Everyone stood there for a moment, breathing hard. Juniper finally broke the silence. I hate malls. Andrew looked down at the items still clutched in his hand. Audrey's hat, the broken necklace. He turned toward the distant lights of Enmity End. I think, he said quietly, my mom has a lot to explain. The VesperGate Mall parking lot looked smaller in the early morning light. Andrew noticed that first. The massive building behind them sat silent beneath the pale blue glow of dawn, its windows dark and lifeless as if the night had never happened. No broken doors, no impossible hallways. Just an abandoned mall waiting for renovation crews to arrive. Juniper leaned against the van, arms folded tightly. I'm gonna say it, she said. Everyone looked at her. I hate malls now. Zane let out a tired laugh from the curb. His baseball cap sat crooked on his head, and his shirt was still streaked with dust from the executive wing. Fair, he said. Ludwig knelt beside a backpack, carefully packing away the last of their equipment. One of the walkie-talkies still hissed softly with leftover static. No one is going to believe this, he muttered. Sloane stood a few feet away, holding the camera. The red recording light was off now. She stared at the small screen for a long moment before finally lowering it. I don't even know if I want them to. Kieran leaned against the hood of the van, rubbing the back of his neck. "We got lucky," he said quietly. No one argued. The wind moved gently through the empty parking lot. For a moment, the group simply stood there together, letting the silence settle. Zane finally broke it. "So, what's the verdict?" Juniper looked at him. "Verdict?" "Our channel," he said. "Urban exploring." He gestured vaguely toward the mall. "Still a thing?" Juniper stared at the building, then she shook her head slowly. "Yeah," she said. "But maybe fewer cursed malls." Ludwig zipped his bag shut. "I vote we stick to abandoned hospitals and factories." Zane raised an eyebrow. "Those are haunted too." Juniper pointed a finger at him. "You are banned from saying that word ever again." Zane smirked faintly, but the smile didn't quite reach his eyes. Sloane finally stepped toward the van. She slipped the camera into her bag and zipped it closed. "We'll figure it out," she said softly. Kieran nodded. "Together." Andrew stood beside his truck, Audrey's hat and the broken necklace still resting in his hand. The others climbed into the van one by one. The engine started with a low rumble. Juniper leaned out the window as they prepared to leave. She looked at Andrew. "You coming?" Andrew shook his head. "Not yet." She studied him for a second, then nodded. "Good luck." The van pulled away slowly, disappearing down the quiet road that led back toward town. Andrew stood alone in the empty parking lot. Behind him, the mall remained perfectly still. Waiting. Andrew glanced down at the items in his hand. Then he turned toward the road. Across town, Velma Hayes was sitting at the kitchen table when Andrew came home. The clock on the stove read 2:14 a.m. The small house was quiet except for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of the wall clock above the sink. Velma looked up as the door opened. "Andrew?" Her voice carried the sleepy concern of someone who had been waiting without meaning to. Andrew stepped inside slowly. The porch light spilled across the kitchen floor behind him before the door clicked shut. For a moment he didn't speak. Velma studied his face, the pale look in his eyes, the way his shoulders carried a weight she recognized too well. "You all right?" she asked gently. Andrew stepped closer to the table. Then he placed two things in front of her: a hat and a necklace. Velma's breath stopped. Her hand trembled as she reached toward the hat first. The faded gemstones along the brim caught the light from the kitchen lamp. Velma's fingers brushed the embroidery as if touching something sacred. "Audrey," she whispered. Andrew sat down across from her. "I found it tonight." Velma looked up sharply. "Where?" Andrew didn't soften the truth. "The mall." The words settled heavily between them. Velma's face went still. Andrew pushed the necklace toward her, two broken halves of a small metal heart, one piece engraved with her name. Velma lifted it slowly. Her thumb traced the letters as tears welled in her eyes. "You found this there?" Andrew nodded. Velma leaned back in her chair. For a long time, she didn't speak. When she finally did, her voice sounded older than Andrew had ever heard it. "I was 17, she said quietly. Andrew listened. Velma stared at the table as she spoke. Audrey and I skipped school that day. The mall had just opened a new arcade and we wanted to see it before everyone else. She swallowed. At first, everything was normal. Her eyes grew distant. Then Audrey found a door. Andrew felt his stomach tighten. Velma continued. It wasn't part of the mall. I knew that immediately. But Audrey thought it was some new storage hallway or something. Her hands shook slightly now. She opened it. Velma exhaled slowly, and the mall on the other side wasn't the same. Andrew leaned forward. What happened to Audrey? Velma's voice barely rose above a whisper. She ran ahead. A tear slipped down her cheek. I never saw her again. The kitchen fell silent. Andrew finally spoke. How did you get out? Velma looked at him. The same way you did. Andrew's eyes widened. Velma gave a sad, knowing smile. There's always a way out. But the mall doesn't like letting people go. The wind outside rattled the windows softly. Velma stood and walked to the sink. For a moment, she stared out into the darkness beyond the backyard. Then she spoke again. There's something else you should know. Andrew waited. Velma's voice grew quieter. The door doesn't stay in one place. Andrew felt a chill run down his spine. Velma turned slowly. It moves. The kitchen clock ticked loudly on the wall. And sooner or later, she said softly, someone always opens it again. Andrew looked down at Audrey's hat resting on the table. Outside, the night wind whispered across the quiet town of Enmity End. Somewhere far away, in a place that should not exist. Fluorescent lights flickered on, and the mall waited.